Hello, thanks for joining us for our Business Agility video podcast. So each week we spend 30 minutes exploring business and technology topics for growing businesses in Canada. So I'm Murray Quibo, I'm the president of Aqurus Solutions, and today we're along with team members Steve Swenson and Samantha DeForge. So we're very excited to be joined today by our guest panelist, Jesse Byam. So Steve and I have known Jesse for, we're going to probably debate the number of years, but I'm going to say over 20 years. And that comes back from our Microsoft Dynamics days.
That number changes every week, by the way.
It does, but I did the math. It is over 20 years. So of course, Jesse was with a company called eTelligent in those days, and then he went on to become a partner with BDO as the oil and gas technology leader. So Jesse has always been a leader in strategic business technology, and that has led him to his current position with Fraction. So somewhere along the way today, we're going to get Jesse to talk a little bit about Fraction in the podcast, and particularly related to the business value of adopting new technologies to streamline business processes. And we're always interested in that kind of stuff, especially sharing ideas around that. Now, we're trying not to anyway. We're not going to get too technical here, but at the same time, we're not going to discourage Jesse from getting into technical type topics and really what are some game-changing technologies that might be coming down in the future. And I wouldn't surprise me if we started talking about 5G networks and some of the stuff that SpaceX is doing. With that, though, I'm going to toss it over to you, Jesse. Tell us a little bit about how we want to kick it off. Maybe tell us a little bit about Fraction. Tell us what you're up to there and how that is helping businesses just be a little bit more streamlined.
Well, and I appreciate that. It is great to be with you guys today. And it is over 20 years. I would like to say, though, that when I started, I was only 15 years old, and you guys were about 30 years old. So hence the difference in how we look. I graduated university very, very early. No, but it's great to be back with you guys after all these years, being competitors, obviously working together and doing all those things. And so it's great to have seen the transition in technology. And so I ended up at Fraction. And what we are is an e-procurement suite, and we really look at facilitating the procurement process and using technology to really streamline that. And in that process, we're looking to connect people with their business partners that are value add and make those things easier. And I'm sure we're going to get into it today, but the key focus of Fraction is enabling your business through technology to do your procurement and have your spend management taken care of and giving visibility into your organization to spend less but save more. In that process and still get the same level of service, if not higher. And there's a lot of ROI that comes with that. But that's the kind of stuff we've been doing and going out to market with. I'm very passionate about obviously going to the cloud and that digital transformation of our clients, as many of them on our legacy ERPs. If we're talking about some of the stuff you guys have done, you've really done a great job with your organization of getting people to the cloud and making sure that it's accessible. So, a lot of our cultural values are going to align quite well on this.
Great. Well, we're going to come back to some of those points there, Jesse, because we want you to ultimately what we want to get to is a couple examples and really just some business benefits. But you mentioned a couple things there. You mentioned a little bit about digital transformation and going to the cloud, and maybe just share some thoughts around that. Obviously we've been around business technology, back in the DOS days. Sorry, that really dates me. But then the Windows days. But now we're into cloud. And I think we've been in cloud technologies and web technologies long enough that we should stop talking about it as being new technologies. But maybe just share some thoughts around that, around what some, just about technologies and why it's really relevant for businesses.
Well, I think we've seen especially a major shift in the culture and the view of companies strategically on how they're viewing technology in their businesses. And so obviously with the change in COVID and the remote workforce, if you look at the remote workforce, we're seeing, a large percentage of companies have made their workforces mobile and remote. And that's actually not going to come back to where it was before. We're going to see 25 to 45% of the jobs that have gone remote stay remote. And so technology is the only way to bring those together and to put that, line. And I agree with you. Like, we've been talking about cloud for years. And it shouldn't be a new thing, but it's hardness for a lot of companies to get there. And so the trend I'm seeing right now is that we do have lots of companies out there who've invested heavily in, so, different ERPs or different processes or, proprietary systems that are on-prem and they can't move them out. But what they should be doing is looking at smaller point solutions or some of these technologies they can and getting them up into the cloud, because it used to feel like I'd put it up in the cloud, but it would stand by itself. There was nothing I could get into it or integrate it with. But today, I mean, that seamless integration is available for almost everything, and they're built to integrate. And so you can have a beautiful, mesh system out in the cloud where your infrastructure costs aren't internal. You're hosting it out there, and someone else is taking care of all that for you, so you can just do your job. And so we're seeing I talk to customers every day who are looking to make that switch and are desperately trying to get some of their stuff to the cloud so they can reach to their remote employees, they can streamline those processes. And this last year has really emphasized that. So we've seen a real hard upswing on that, the hockey stick effect, where it's kind of going. And this last year, it's really taken that turn and gone up.
Yeah, Sam, why don't you share some? I mean, obviously, we've talked about business digital transformation and related to business. It's been a pretty common theme, but maybe just why don't you share a few thoughts of what we're seeing out there with some customers, and we'll get Jesse to weigh in on some of them. But what are some thoughts that you're seeing, Sam, around companies that we've seen do some rapid digital transformation these days?
I think that COVID is definitely really, like Jesse said, that hockey stick effect, that it's really streamlined businesses and made them have to, ramp up to the cloud, get digitally transformed, and very quickly for that matter. I did a whole digital transformation series on our YouTube channel even a few years ago, talking about the benefits of moving into something integrated, of, moving to something that's more of that glue software, right? How we always talked about an ERP being the glue and a really centralized point of any business. And that goes everything from accessing your data, right? So something is like the first stepping stone, being able to access your data, whether it's through a web browser when you're using a truly cloud solution. But in other cases, in more older products, you're still stuck using VPNs or remote desktops. So that initial step to get there is still, it's part of that mesh. It's that mesh screen we talked about too with the Gartner, that, what was it? The mesh, I don't remember the exact terminology that they used, but the mesh screen as far as businesses, right? So I definitely think a lot of businesses have realized that this is here to stay. Like Jesse mentioned, this is not something businesses probably won't go back to normal. Some will, some won't. So it's caused a huge rift in the market and a huge need for companies to digitally transform to really make sure that operations aren't affected on a day-to-day.
Yeah, what I like about that though is it forced them. The hardest part about change is getting people to say we can do it, because they're satisfied with that status quo. And I think you guys have seen it in your customer base the same way I'm seeing it, is the status quo was all of a sudden gone. It didn't exist, and they were forced to make changes. And now that they're going to be way more open to further change and to further take those things out. And that's why I've loved, from your guys' perspective, and the stuff that you've been providing, is you guys have been cloud first for a long time. And I think that that mentality and that culture is going to shift across the market completely, where anybody who's saying, well, we should always be on-prem for everything, that doesn't exist anymore. It just isn't there. And so it's super cool to, sometimes forced change is great, because it just accelerates what should have been happening anyway.
Still feel like a lot of businesses are on the fence about it, though. I still feel like we're almost at that cusp. We're almost at the point where, it's SaaS and software as a service is going to become the future. There are still a lot of companies out there that are still in that. We're on that ridge right now, and we're at the point that there is, I'd say 60 to 70% of businesses, once COVID hit, made this huge leap to digitally transform, or wanted to. The incentive was there. They wanted to. Whether or not they actually did, I think it's a smaller number. But when you look at the other people, they just sort of focus more on those Band-Aid fixes, right? Like, how can we just get the business sustained? Technology isn't that important. So I think at this point, a year later, since this pandemic started, we're now sitting on this ridge where businesses are sitting there going, do we do this? Do we not do this? This isn't such a big deal anymore. COVID's been around for a year. So what are we going to do as a business now, as far as technology goes?
I want to ask, I'll get Jesse to kind of give us a couple of specifics on that, but just to For the audience members here, we're interactive. Ask us your questions today. We're joined by Jesse Byam. He's with Fraction, and we've known Jesse for a long time. He's been in the business technology for a lot of years, and we really value his thoughts on the way technology has come and gone. But Jesse, why don't you share some ideas about, as Samantha mentions, is that there's a lot of companies it's really everyone resists change. Technology, the successful deployment of technology is always variable based on people, and when people are naturally resistant to change. But how do we get them over that hump, as Samantha referred to? And I guess where I want you to take this is, there are some compelling business benefits, and maybe just share some ideas or thoughts or examples that you're doing every day with Fraction as to some compelling reasons that companies need to kind of look at some more advanced technology.
People are always the problem, right? You put a person in a process, that's where your hiccup's going to be. But there's a ton of value and ROI to be gained by looking at technology as a strategic initiative within inside of the company.
Yep.
So, for example, one of the things that we really focus on heavily in our company is connecting our customers with their biggest partners. And I go back, Steve, when we were first starting and we were transitioning people off DOS to, the initial Windows-based stuff, and it was crazy. And I never thought to myself, we would never, they talk about, well, what if I could connect to my biggest strategic partners and do all these things? But that was an enterprise player's game. You had to be a big client to be able to spend a lot of money, and then you could connect to a small amount of your suppliers, but it was a good thing. Now with what's going on in terms of moving that into the mid-market and enabling that business. So for example, one of the things that we've done is created a technology called Punch Out, which allows you to actually connect your purchasing system into your biggest partners. And so those biggest partners or ones that you spend the most money with could be, Office Depot, Staples, Amazon, Grainger. There's a number of them where you're actually able to connect your system to their web services. They use a technology called CXML, and that's as deep as we're going to go into the technology side of it.
Good. You already lost me there.
That's right. We won't go deep into that, but as long as they have a CXML enabled website, we're able to connect our system into it. And so one of the examples we did recently was we did an event with Amazon, and brought one of our customers, Easter Seals, in and talked about their experience. And so they literally, because and this is where the transition makes it easier. If you enable people with the tools they use every day in their normal life, it makes the business side of things way easier from an adoption perspective. And so when people went to go create a requisition because they needed to buy something, they literally, on the Amazon side, they literally from inside of their requisitioning software said, I want to buy from Staple or from Amazon. They click the button, they go to the website, they would shop like they do every day, which is through the pandemic was astounding how many people shop through Amazon or those websites. So that's what they're familiar with. And they literally go in, and at the end where we normally say checkout, it literally simply says submit for approval. And when you push that button, all those line items and all the costs, everything roll into your accounting or into your requisition system, and you literally said submit for approval, click. Now, when the reviewer sees that, so I haven't had to enter any documents, I haven't had to, other than to add a quantity, I haven't had to type in my line items, I haven't type in a description, I haven't do anything. It just automatically fills when it goes to the approver. And so I said to the person there, I said, okay, so an order's come to you from Amazon, what do you do? She goes, well, I click a button. And then she sat there and I was like, oh yeah, okay. So you click a button and then what else do you do to make that work? She says, no. I click a button. I look at it, I approve it, I say yes. And then automagically, that's our technical term, that invoice transmits to Amazon. Amazon fulfills the order, sends the invoice, sends the packing slip. We do a 3-way match inside of the system, and it's set for approval and to be put into your accounting system. So it literally went from people having to go out, research where they were going to buy, what they were going to do, typing it all in, by line item, hoping the price was right, finding the right vendor, to I connected to my best vendor who gives me the best price and appreciates my business the most. I went in, selected on a website just like I would normally. So user adoption, super easy, click. And the process was submit, approve, pay, and simple. And that is an astounding amount of ROI saving for a company when they can connect to those big business partners. And we talk about the Amazons and Staples of the world. And, I've had this conversation with lots of people lately. The mid-market and some of our niche geographical players are getting into this so that they can service the clients and their people that are buying from them. So this is no longer an enterprise player's game. That technology is now available, readily available across many platforms for a lot of these customers. And so we're seeing a lot of those vendors enable their websites so that we can do this with them. So that's just one example of how we're really optimizing the technology and the openness of the data that's available to be able to really streamline those processes down into what used to take hours and hours and people running forms back and forth between buildings or offices to get signed, and then this person and that, down to minutes.
I know some of the, some of these technologies that have kind of come and gone over the years. There's EDI and things like that. Again, the premise of EDI or other kind of exchange type platforms is to do exactly the kind of sharing. But almost what you're talking about, you're almost kind of bypassing some of those older technologies like that, aren't you? It sounds like you're able to, so we're not having to drop in an EDI, you're not having to do mapping of documents back and forth. It just seems to work right now. I know that's, as much as we talked about being auto magic, there's some technology behind it, and there's probably some business pieces of technology that companies need to be on before they can adopt that. But can you maybe give without getting too technical, a little bit of the platforms that maybe companies need to be on to start to leverage this stuff?
It actually is quite simple. Like it's platform agnostic. It's like you need a web browser and an account with these guys, and literally as long as you can direct it. And the nice part is that when you put it into our requisitioning system, we can then move that automatically again into the accounting system for payment. So we're automating that process, right from the beginning when someone says, I just need to buy something, to the point where we're actually paying for it over here in the company, which certainly involves a ton of steps, but technology wise, because we're in the cloud, it's much like you guys deal with from an ERP perspective. The infrastructure that they require is a web browser and the internet. And, we all want to live our life off of this. We want to live off a phone. And being able to create the ability to make data-driven decisions and get data on those phones and make those decisions and have that happen, that's where that's all going. And so the infrastructure requirements are so low, and the architecture you need, we as companies, Amazon's or whoever's doing that on their end, they manage that infrastructure. Our company manages the infrastructure any of our customers use. It just makes that super simple. You don't have to worry about the architecture the way we used to worry about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the other things people think about, maybe talk about security or supportability. And I know that, as you use your smartphones or use your device, and we know that that's not going away. Companies and people are going to continue to use whatever device it is that they are using, but maybe help people understand how the security framework makes it such that that's still able to be done securely.
Well, I think you raise a great point, because security has become the big issue. Like lots of people are quite concerned where their data is going, where it resides, who has access, how do I control that? When I look at some of the point solutions like ours out there and some of these players, you have to make sure that they are building their platforms in an area that makes that very secure. So, for example, for years we had our own security model that we used with inside of the application, which is what most of them did. But what we're seeing now today is the integration of Active Directory in the cloud with Microsoft. AWS has got its security services, and so our application resides within Microsoft's application, and we're able to benefit from the security of Microsoft, which is very secure, very solid, and familiar to your organization. So it's not like we have to go out and rebuild or redo anything. Yeah. So I think when you're researching these things, you need to make sure that they're hosted in a place, or that their architecture is built from a security perspective that takes advantage of what the bigger companies like AWS, Microsoft, and some of these guys have built, so that you can keep that data secure. Yeah. And it all works across the platforms. And so I think that's a critical piece.
A couple of thoughts I have then. So we're 20 minutes after the hour. We've got 10 more minutes left here. A couple of thoughts I have. I want to get into a little bit about business intelligence and data and analytics, a little bit like that, and get your perspective on that. Also, the other thing that I want to talk about is some game-changing technologies. But I don't know, Steve, is there anything, any kind of topic areas that you might want to get into and just share some examples of what's, how companies in Western Canada can take advantage of some of this stuff?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, and I know we've talked about a few things, but Jesse pointed out the whole everybody wants to do business from their phone.
Yeah.
And the ability to get your internet access and the next level of internet access and being able to have all of that stuff at your fingertips wherever you are on the planet. That's a big one. And you mentioned at the very beginning, Murray, about 5G or the next generation of things. Those are some of the things that I think people they're not really thinking about, but when they come, nobody's going to turn away. I think it's going to be the ability to do all of that work remotely. And Jesse, you said it right on at the beginning there, where 25% of people aren't going back to work.
Yeah, the home office is going to be, it's going to be massive. And actually the percentages look like they could be even higher. As this is extended on, people, are starting to say, well, even less people can come to the office because we know we can make it work.
Yeah, and on that note, I know I talked to a friend of mine back in the fall, and he works for a city and the IT department of a city, and he was told, right, well, not IT, but just technology services, and they were told back in September that at minimum 25% were not coming back to work. He will never see his office again. He will continue to work from home, and that's the way it's going to be. They figure that number is minimum 25%, could be as high as 40%. Will never go to the office anymore.
I actually don't go to the office anymore ever because my office is in Seattle.
Yeah,
so I've been a year without seeing my office.
You're there now, right? Aren't you? I can see it in the background.
In the background, it looks like I'm in Seattle, sunny Seattle. No, I think it is an interesting conversation. And if I, take what you were saying, Murray, and then add on what Steve was saying. So if I look at two pieces, one is business intelligence or data. And I think that one of the critical things that successful companies are doing is that they are at the point of decision providing relevant, up-to-date information so that their employees can make data-driven decisions. And it's a really key component. Like lots of people like to say, well, you have the data, but it's like when we first started and they'd be like, well, when am I gonna get my financials? And they're like, well, our month end close isn't for another 10 days. And then we'll do another 20 to 30 days reporting. And then Steve's gonna create a spreadsheet for you that will put out your balance sheet and your income statement. And in 45 days, you're going to know what you did 45 days ago, and then we'll, on a project level, we're going to report every month on everything that's happened from day one of that month. And you might get that 10 or 15 days after that month closes. And then we're going to give you the information where you're at your project. Those days are gone. And if you're still managing your business that way, you're probably close to being gone with them. So when we talk about these things, one of the most important things I think is, the democratization of data. And so, cloud systems are great at this. The data is available, it's live, it's ready, it's getting them in their hands. And so I really, really am passionate about data-driven decisions by employees because 99.9% of the time, employees want to make the best decision for your business. But the minute I don't give them access to the budget, I don't give them access to where things are at, what's committed, what's not committed, I put into their hands and their gut feel my business. And I think that's hard on them. Yeah. We want them to make the best decision. So if you can't do that, then you're limiting the potential of your employees to really help your business.
Well, I think it's shocking. It's still in today's world. We've talked about digital transformation, and in some cases it's natural, and in other cases it's been forced by what we've seen over the last year. But it's still shocking to see how many businesses are still running on manual processes, paper-based processes, and spreadsheets. And I think that, like, to your point there, Jesse, is that if you really want people to make informed decisions, if you want those decisions to be based on data, well, you have to have it structured and consistent, timely, accurate, all the things, the pillars of strong data. And our approach is that, hey, to get there, you do have to be on a modern ERP system as its core, but then that's a starting point, and then what do you do with it after? But that's kind of our view around the data and analytics. But I don't know if anyone else wants to share just some other thoughts of how do we, obviously that's a fairly fundamental thing, is you can't make data-based decisions if you actually don't have the data because it's sitting on a piece of paper. But maybe just share some other thoughts around how you can get to help better make better decisions using data.
I have definitely something to add on that. So I saw an article the other day. I think it was about a week ago, about how the new CIO is now placed in a very different role, because they're not saying that technology is no longer an aspect of the business.
Yeah.
It is the business. So we think back, I know 20 years ago is past my time, but even that 10 years ago, when you have an IT manager, you're talking networking, you're talking security, you're talking server updates and all this hard infrastructure sitting in a building, in a server room that's pressure controlled or whatever. That is now a thing of the past. And now CIOs are faced with now having to adjust, because they're not talking about technology and networking and infrastructure. They're talking about finding ways to enhance the business operationally speaking. This whole article says technology isn't just an aspect anymore. It is the business. It's no longer, just cables and pieces of plastic.
Yeah, if you don't view your IT group as a strategic part of your business, you're probably missing out.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, so it's hard because it's a concept that's been the same for so many years, right? Since the beginning of the internet, the concept of servers and computers or even things like that has been the same for about, let's say, 25, 30 years. So now this whole rift has hit the market, right? Same thing when it comes to technology. I love analogies, but let's say, you play an instrument, like I play the piano. If you're using technology and you're having this stuck in the same mentality that you've used for 20 to 30 years, and you're not constantly trying to get better, you're playing the same song on a repeat. So how do you expect to get better as a pianist, aka a business, if you don't try to challenge your business with newer technology? And now that technology is the business, this is unfortunately the way that people have to go. And we talked about how people are usually the driving factor for things like this, and it's because people are emotional. Right. So if you eliminate emotion as much as you can out of a business, and let's say just feed your people with data and all the things that they need, the analytics, and power that, and just hand the information to them, you've now eliminated emotion. You've now eliminated so many different factors, and people are much more resourceful when it comes to doing their tasks day to day.
The challenge is always going to be a couple of minutes. So a couple of final thoughts here, but the challenge is going to be, as like you were saying, Sam, just a second ago, is that there's a lot of business benefit to do it, but now we're faced with a kind of a not so great economic environment, and I think the challenge comes back to us as solution providers to say, how do we make this more compelling? How do we get it more easy to adopt? How can you start with one thing and let's create some compelling business benefit? And that's on us to make sure that we help our prospects or our customers do that kind of thing. So that'd be my closing thought. As we go around the table, a couple of closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap up.
I'll go next. My closing thought would be, think about it like mobile banking. That, 10 or 15 years ago was such a hard concept for people to adapt to. And we as people have had so many of these transitions happen over the course of the last, let's say, 30 years with the introduction of the internet, so to speak, right? So when we talk about having to adopt new technology, this isn't the first time that we as people are doing this. We've done it with the internet, we've done it with Facebooks, we've done it with, social media, we've done it with online banking. Like, imagine having to not have your bank on your phone and still have, it's not a normal concept anymore. So this adoption happens all the time. So people need to just start saying, oh, this is what we're doing. Great. Let's move on.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that there's some fun technology I wish we could have got into. And I think I'm going to hand it to Steve after this, because I think he and I are on the same page. You talked about 5G. The change in the world, and so SpaceX, and you mentioned that earlier. I want to make sure.
I was wondering when you're
going to hit it. I'm so pumped about SpaceX because it's going to change the world in terms of internet connectivity. So, a lot of people are thinking, well, that's, what it is, no big deal. What it's not going to change that much, or whatever you want to talk about. So SpaceX is incredible. And so I've actually got two of my brothers on the beta of that and actually getting internet. So they live out in the country a long ways. They have really hard time getting phone service, let alone internet. And they are on the beta and they're on the program. And let me tell you, they're getting 125 meg download without blinking. And Elon Musk has just said, so he's launched 60 satellites. He's going to go to 1,500 satellites. And their next move is to go to 300 megs per second on this. Now think of the rest of the world where they don't have infrastructure. They don't have wires, and they'll never have them. They won't be like us. They won't need them. They will literally just beam that down and enable a country to do it. And as a business with disparate people and remote workers, it is going to be a game changer. I mean, I say it again, open the world up to data, open it up. It's going to get crazy. It's going to be awesome. And Steve, I know you mentioned it. So, I mean, I don't know how you're seeing the 5G going, but I'm pumped about SpaceX. I'd love to come back and talk about that one.
I can't wait to live at my lake house in the middle of nowhere and have a satellite.
Yeah.
Satellite internet.
Exactly. That's going to be, this whole working remotely thing is going to boom when SpaceX gets that to be more publicly available for everybody and people start doing it. Because I could spend the summer at the lake and nobody would know because I can work from there just as easily as I can work from home.
Yep.
Aren't you in some remote mountains right now? I can see that in background. But anyway, with that, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for joining us, and we'll come back and we'll get more detail into SpaceX and next time here.
Well, and if we do meet up, like I said, I got some brothers on it. I would love to share some of their experiences over the next couple of months.
Invite them over too for a podcast.
Potentially.
That's good. We'll do some real live testing. Let's get some real live, how does it working for them? And we'll talk about them. But okay, thanks a lot, guys. I think we should sign up for now.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jesse.